Hey, it's Adam here, and you're watching The Culture Hack, where we're talking about how to create engaged workspaces that unlock the potential of your teams and drive your business forward in ways you've never seen. So stay tuned. Hello, and welcome to another episode of The Culture Hack. Today is really exciting. I have my friend Ben Clarke on with me, who, ironically enough, I've never talked to virtually. We always talk in person. So this is kind of a flip from the usual swing of things. Welcome, Ben. He is the founder of Challenging Panoramas, so I'm super excited. Thanks for coming on, Ben.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. My first ever podcast.
So, is it your first ever? Okay, well then.
Expecting big things.
Exactly. The world is about to change, I think. So, but with that, tell us about Challenging Panoramas.
So I provide my solopreneur at Challenging Panoramas. I provide fractional chief people officer services. I work remotely around the world, based in Calgary here, and also in the UK. So you may have heard of fractional CFO services. Yep. Generally want for companies that have kind of less than 300 people, I would say, that don't want to invest in having their own CFO. So I provide CPO, Chief People Officer services, to companies of about that size in different places around the world. Mm-hmm. And there are 5 categories. If I get opportunity to pitch here, there are 5 categories of service that I provide.
Okay. All right.
So the first one is people development. I'm trained as a coach, credentialed as a coach. Mm-hmm. And so my specialty is executive coaching and leadership development. I've written an 85 module MBA level leadership development program that I deliver for companies. So people development is a huge passion of mine. The second focus of fractional CPO is building successful teams. I'm passionate about building teams that work well. So a few different varieties of that, building teams from scratch, for example, in a startup environment, or a new project, helping form the ideal team. Repairing trust in teams that are struggling, and helping already good teams become great. And by that, I mean successful, effective, and fun. The third part of what I do is helping companies create clear communication, clear conversation. And that looks like helping companies give feedback effectively. Mm-hmm. It means helping companies do meetings better, to do communication better, so less email. And the holy grail, I guess, is doing remote working as effectively as possible. So I'm passionate about clear communication. The fourth thing I do is help companies sharpen up their performance. So I do that by making performance tracking simpler. And if it's simpler, it can be done more regularly, more frequently. And if it can be done more frequently, it can actually be a bit more use. It can actually happen closer to the event, rather than saving things up for a year. Mm-hmm. And I'm a big fan of mapping mindset across the whole workforce as a way of increasing performance. Happy to talk more about that. And then the last part of what I do is help companies work smarter. A lot of companies are still doing what they were doing 20 years ago, just because it works well. But I help companies implement new ways of agile working. I help companies build clarity and alignment in their leadership teams. I help companies redesign and restructure. And finally, I help companies hire smarter, to put everything that we know into the hiring process, to find the people that will fit right culturally. Okay. So 5 parts of what I do as a fractional chief people officer to companies around the world, generally smaller than 300 people.
Gotcha. I love that. There's so many corners we could go into here. So
please.
Right? I mean, we bring all these 5 pieces together. You know, I'm picturing like spokes of a wheel, right? And you bring it to the center. And ultimately what we're trying to get is that ROI. People are excited to come to work. They're coached. They're right? The productivity spikes, turnover goes down. But what is, when you say engagement, if you were to take those 5 things and bring it together into one, like how would you describe engagement for a team?
Engagement is, I think, what we're all working towards in different ways. So engagement for me is bringing my whole self to work, not just my work self, not just my qualified self, not just my experienced self, but my whole self, everything to work. That would be full engagement in an environment of purpose, knowing why I'm doing what I'm doing, in an environment of clarity, and an environment of trust. Engagement for me is choosing to engage with others. That might be an obvious definition, but choosing to engage with others involves taking risks about being understood, about getting things wrong, about them seeing parts of me that aren't part of my polished work persona. So full engagement for me is choosing to take risks. And I think it's important. I think it's important because it's where the whole becomes greater than the sum of its parts. Like we can behave in a little bit of isolation and work effectively in silos, and it works well up to a point. Engagement for me is when the walls of the silos dissolve and the whole starts becoming greater than the sum of the parts. Spokes of a wheel kind of dissolve and the pieces of the wheel kind of merge together and become a solid disc.
I love that idea, right? I mean, you can pay someone to show up, but they'll stay in a comfortable box and do their job. But if you want them to go out and be uncomfortable and really push the limit of what's possible, that's got to be volunteered, right? So I think that's a beautiful way to describe it. That's pretty neat. And I think even as you're talking, I'm thinking back to some of the large companies I've worked in my career, and I can just picture the people that were, right into everything feet first, like let's go, and then the others that were like, no, it's okay, I fill the forms, don't worry, don't bother me, right? So
all about risks.
That's really cool. But it's easier said than done, right? And I think even when you read the books and you hear about places that are doing this amazing job of this, it's not without its obstacles or challenges, right? And you kind of listed off your 5 categories designed to address some of these challenges. But in your travels with companies, are there any specific obstacles that kind of stand out, or stories or things that you've had to deal with?
Yeah, I think as I was preparing for this conversation, I realized that the most common thing is that people make it too complicated. And for me, engagement and building engagement can be simplified. For me, I guess there would be 3 parts to that. So I think if we explain why we're asking people to do what we ask as a huge step, I think a lot of companies still fall into the mistake of knowledge is power, and kind of retaining all the knowledge in the leadership team and just asking people to do tasks rather than actually explaining what we're trying to achieve. So providing context for me is a huge part of engagement. If people know why they're being asked to do what they are, they're more likely to choose to engage. So context, why are we doing it? And then if leaders just ask, they just say what needs doing by when, and then give people space to do it. Step back, lead from a distance, provide support, any support that's needed, provide anything they can do to help, but basically stay back while people do what they have been asked to do.
What they do best, right? Sometimes your job is to get out of the way, right?
Right. And then once you've done it, reward them and say thank you in ways including money, but not limited to money. So I think by explaining to people what needs to be done, giving them the space to do it, and then saying thank you when they've done it, is a great way to build engagement. I think the second problem I've seen in different places is it's actually quite difficult to identify people who are not engaged. Sure, you can always find somebody skulking around a corridor, but actually there may be more people that are not engaged. And engagement surveys are a funny thing, right? Because if you have somebody in the workforce who's not engaged, and you say, "Here's an engagement survey, go away and fill it out," how engaged are they going to be in filling out the engagement survey? Well, probably not great. And so then we're going to put a lot of weight on their answers, are we? That makes a lot of sense. So the whole engagement survey thing seems a bit of an old way of measuring engagement. I'm a fan of mapping mindset instead. Questions testing people's growth mindset, for example, like what made you think hard today? What's the most challenging thing that you're working on right now? What are you doing that you don't know how to do? All kinds of cool information comes back. Do you agree with this statement? I know what I need to succeed, and I'm relentless in going to get it. I think that's a definition of engaged.
I like that.
And so mapping mindset shows people who may or may not be a fit for your organization, but it does show others who are not engaged and may need, you could think of all kinds of ways of intervening there, but maybe they just need better leadership.
Right.
And maybe engagement just comes down to leadership.
Right. Sometimes I wonder, if you just ask people, hey, what do you think about, like, people just all of a sudden just, an hour later, right? They just want to be asked and feel like somebody.
Keep it simple.
It's so. Right. I agree. It's the simplest, tiniest little things. Like, one thing that I really take to heart, and I always try to do, is if I have an idea and I've decided on a way forward and I'm telling the team what I want to do, I'll always start with, hey, listen, I have this idea. Can you guys please shoot holes with it and just tell me that if I'm crazy? And it immediately creates a space that they're like, all right, like, let's get into it, right? Versus this is what we're doing. Yeah. One sentence changes the whole thing. And I think with this engagement stuff, it's 1,000 tiny, minute things, not a big gesture, right?
Yeah, so, I totally agree.
So what do you see, the future of engagement? As you say, like, the big engagement survey seems to be slowly, people are looking for new and better ways to do that. What do you see as the future of driving engagement with all the technologies and AI tools that can scan your emails and look for clues? And, what do you think the future looks like?
I think it's anti-tech, actually. I think it's going right back to communication. I think decreasing power gradient is a way that companies have a lot of success increasing engagement. If you have a high power gradient, you concentrate all the decisions, all the knowledge, all the power in a few hands. If you lower the power gradient, you distribute that power, you distribute responsibility and ownership and trust. I think reducing the performance aspect of leadership. Leaders are actually normal people, and the less we as leaders pretend that we know all the answers, I think the more that increases engagement. I think leaders who are transparent and authentic have teams that are more engaged, in my experience. I think there's a role of tech here in helping us understand how people are thinking, how people are reacting, how people are behaving on a more sort of accessible and frequent level than just big surveys once a year, trying to use that to describe our companies. So experimenting with alternatives to engagement surveys, I think, is an interesting thing for the future. Emphasizing the role of people's direct leader in engagement. I think engagement surveys often get interpreted as the company is doing this wrong or the company needs to do this better, could do this better. I think more and more we need to interpret engagement, low engagement, as affecting, as what I'm trying to say, as showing efficiency and quality of that person's direct leader, direct supervisor. I think engagement is an individual subject, a team specific subject. So I'm a big fan of bringing in one-on-ones every week or every 2 weeks at most. One-on-ones with a person with their direct leader to go over more than just a to-do list. I think people are great about checking off to-do lists with their leaders, but what if the one-on-one went a bit further than that? What if it included bigger picture goals, progress, discussion, actually open conversation, like leaders are asking open questions like, what do you see that I'm doing that you would do differently? What am I missing? How would you do this? I think engagement can be built on a one-on-one basis like that, and that spreads through the whole company. So I'd like to see more of that in future. And the last thing I think is increasing permission to fail. I work with companies in doing all kinds of exciting things who are innovating and growing and exploding. And companies that give their people permission to fail and permission to get things wrong and to make mistakes have the most engaged staff. A story that I might have told you that I think I tell everybody, didn't happen to me, but happened to one of my mentors, is they started a new job. And the first thing that their director said to them was, hey, we brought you in this role with some responsibility to be innovative, to create new ideas. Obviously, some of those will work and be awesome, and some of those won't. And some of those will create a right mess. And I want you to know that I'm right behind you. I will help you clear up any mess. I've got your back.
Wow.
And
how cool is that?
That's stuck with me. It didn't happen to me. It happened to a mentor of mine. But that is trust-inspired engagement in my mind. And the more we can develop leaders like that, I think the more engaged workforces we'll have.
I love that. I might steal that line. That's a really great intro. Very cool. Well, Ben, I really appreciate your insights. You've had one of the most thoughtful responses I've had on this show. So thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the conversation.
Hey, thanks for watching The Culture Hack. Do you want to chat culture and engagement? Give us a call and come on the show.